Share screen. Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to the Orange County Local Applicant Meeting for the Continuum of Care FY22 Notice of Funding Opportunity. Today is August 15th. Our purpose and goal here is to talk a little bit about the CoC grant opportunity, talk a little bit more about the competition broadly, and then move into kind of the local timeframe and process, as well as provide an opportunity for you all to ask questions and just learn from one another. Again, we want this to be an open and competitive process that has a lot of room for new voices and new organizations in this space. So I really appreciate folks making time to join us this afternoon on a Monday. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. Just as a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be available on the partnership website later today. And then we're also keeping a live transcription of this event, and that will be posted and available as well for folks. So first, we're going to jump into the Continuum of Care grant overview. So there's really two sources of HUD homeless funds that are both determined at the local level. So the Continuum of Care funds provide funding and support for things like permanent housing options like permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. Also provide funding for HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System, as well as provide support for prevention in communities that have been designated high performing by HUD. And then also provide support for coordinated entry, which is a kind of front door to the homeless service system that is it's a requirement for HUD funding, and provides a standardized kind of assessment process with prioritization for those homeless resources and referrals that is open and transparent with policies and procedures that are determined by the community. And then a portion of the Continuum of Care funds provide support for Continuum of Care planning activities, which, as many of y'all know, involves a lot of meetings and talking about things and trying to figure out the solutions that are going to work here in Orange County. The other pot of money that comes in from HUD to Orange County is called the Emergency Solutions Grant that provides funding and support for crisis response services, so emergency shelter and street outreach, and then housing stability activities like rapid rehousing and prevention, and then also support for things like HMIS, that database, and administrative funds. Currently, the things that are highlighted in red are getting funded in Orange County, and then the things that are in gray are eligible costs and activities, but are not currently getting funded in Orange County. And so when we say the CoC, y'all know HUD likes their acronyms. CoC actually has two different meanings. One is kind of that pot of funding that we were talking about, that is the large source of homeless funding, and is determined kind of based on population and HUD determination of need. And so that brings up between $800,000 and $900,000 into Orange County annually, or I'm sorry, up to $800,000 to $900,000 into Orange County annually. But then it also refers to kind of the geographic confines for our planning area. And so in Orange County, that is kind of the borders of Orange County, inclusive of the municipalities like Chapel Hill, Carrboro, Hillsborough, and then some of the unincorporated areas as well. And so when we talk about how that money flows from your pockets as tax dollars to the federal government, and then from HUD down back into the local communities, we're looking first at, HUD over here at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's in a relationship with nonprofits, government agencies, and public housing authorities to meet our housing goals for our neighbors. And then looking also at the role that the Orange County Partnership plays in this work. So HUD sets some federal priorities and also determines eligibility for those funds. And when we're talking specifically about our continuum of care application, we're actually talking about 3 different things. So we're talking about the project applications that you all as potential project applicants will be completing. We're also talking about a project priority list. So that priority is really kind of set by the community through the project review committee here in Orange County. And then the partnership as the CoC lead agency submits a community application on behalf of the entire Orange County to help kind of share our priorities, the ways that we are engaged in planning and coordination efforts, also to demonstrate the ways that we are hosting a fair and open and competitive funding process for these HUD funds. So you all as eligible parties, like nonprofits, government agencies, or PHAs, complete project applications. Those project applications are then reviewed by the Partnership to End Homelessness. So as staff, I provide some of the objective data that some of the measure elements will be measured by. And then the project review committee sends a ranked list of projects to the Orange County Partnerships leadership team, which functions as the board of directors. And then we send that listing to HUD in addition to the project applications that you all submit and the community application that the partnership submits on behalf of Orange County. There's a listing, we send it, and then the funds flow directly from HUD into nonprofits, government agencies, and the Public Housing Authority. And again, those things are dependent on both the project applications that you all submit, as well as the community application, where we get scored on the basis of how well we're doing at fulfilling our requirements. And so that determines eligibility for things like bonus funds. One thing that's a little bit different with the Emergency Solutions Grant, which we held the local applicant briefing for the other week, and that with that grant, HUD contract with the state of North Carolina under the ESG office, under the Department of Health and Human Services, and then Orange County is considered a subrecipient of that pot of money. So the partnership, again, serves as the continuum of care for Orange County. Partnerships work is a couple of fold. So it's funded by the towns of Chapel Hill, Carrboro, Hillsborough, and Orange County on a population-based formula. The partnership's administrative home is Orange County, and we receive some ongoing support from the Orange County Housing Department for some of those administrative functions. And the CoC's work is really to provide both funding opportunities, but also ongoing coordination for CoC and ESG funded programs, but also to take a kind of wider lens view and really implement our plan to end homelessness in Orange County. So to look at how we're doing as a system, identify gaps in the system, and then work with you all to determine the course of action we may take to help fill those gaps. This work entails many meetings, as I know many of you know and understand on a regular basis. And really, I think the strength of our work really lies in these partnerships with one another. And then starting in the spring of 2020, the partnership started to add direct service work, first providing coordinated entry through the housing helpline, and then adding on rapid rehousing, street outreach and homelessness prevention, utilizing a variety of grant sources for those funds, and then also brought on a housing access coordinator who is working on those kind of community level landlord recruitment and retention efforts. We can do the excellent work we do all day long. We need to be partnering with landlords and property management companies and other providers of housing in order to make this all work. So any questions about any of that before we move directly into the 2022 CoC competition? Sorry, my questions are being blocked. Let's see. Okay. All right, we will jump into what is new first and foremost for 2022. As folks may remember from last year, there was a pandemic going on that required a lot of coordination and collaboration with housing and healthcare resources. We know that the folks who were experiencing homelessness, particularly folks living unsheltered, were at greater risk for contracting COVID and having worse health outcomes as a result. And so this year, we're going to see a continued focus on greater collaboration with housing and healthcare resources. And so HUD will be looking to see the ways that project applicants are collaborating with those sources of support for folks, either through memorandums of understanding or other letters of support, and that we're really kind of braiding these resources together for the betterment of folks experiencing homelessness in our community. HUD also, when they're looking at determining kind of rating and ranking community applications, is also going to really look for a return to those system performance metrics. They were kind of de-emphasized last year because of all of the COVID-related disruptions to all of life. But really, we know HUD knows that length of stays were impacted, ability to kind of get out and increase income through employment was impacted. All of the ways I think we all know the way our lives were impacted by COVID. HUD is now looking to see a bit of a return, not just a return to normal, but a greater emphasis again on that collaboration with partners across systems of care and integrated systems of care, not just housing, but also looking to see the ways that our system performance metrics are improving based again on some of those collaborations we've got. Another thing that's a little bit different this year than last year is that top ranked projects that are considered to be tier 1 will be funded at 95% of the annual renewal demand. And we'll talk dollars and cents on the next slide. But just want to let folks know that last year, the top ranked projects, so those projects that were in tier 1 were ranked at 100%. So everyone who had gotten renewal funds the previous year, as long as they were ranked in that first tier, they were eligible to basically get straight renewals. This year introduces a little bit more competition again, where those top ranked projects will be funded at 95%. And that's where the discussions around some of the bonus projects come in that we'll want to consider. Next, some feedback from HUD at the office hours last week was really encouraging folks to use the detailed instructions. So when you're submitting your project applications in eSnaps, there is certainly information in there that is helpful, but HUD cannot fit all of the pertinent information directly into the eSnaps application. And so you'll definitely want to use the detailed instructions that will be available on HUD's website. We were assured it would be in the next couple of days. I've been checking that daily, and we'll post on the partnership's website as well as on the partnership's Facebook page when the detailed instructions and the project applications are available in eSnaps. And then the other thing is that character limit has increased from 2,000 characters to 2,500 characters. Again, as much as we all love filling up all the characters and getting as much bang for our buck in the words that we use, HUD is also reading many, many, many of these project applications and community applications. And so they, in response to some feedback they received, they increase a character limit to allow us adequate space to describe the work that we're doing. Any questions on those things so far?
Yes, I have a quick question. So yeah. I know what's new for 2022 says a return to system performance metrics. Because we don't use HMIS, we are unable to get a report out. Do you know if that's going to be like a mark against victim service providers, or like how do you all use that information to factor in, or how does HUD use that information in this process?
Yeah, good question, Lakira. So at the local level, so for the local funding competition, we'll use the DV comparable database information that you all provide that we use on the project performance matrix. Mm-hmm. That I think we did the crop. Sorry. But that crosswalk that we did between HMIS and Osnium, so still looking at those things like length of time in program, returns to homelessness, length of time to find housing, those kinds of things. So at the local level, the project review committee will still look at CoMPAS's system performance matrix or metrics using that information. I know in conversations with the North Carolina Coalition to End Homelessness that there is one of the things that HUD is working on is a way to better pull in that DV comparable database, Osnium, into the system performance metrics that HUD looks at when they pull the community's information from HMIS. I don't know where they are in that. I will say that it's highly likely that kind of whatever you all are doing at CoMPAS is going to be very similar to what's happening, at other kind of DV service providers or folks who are statutorily prohibited from using HMIS across the country. So yeah, I'm happy to kind of follow up with an ask a question to HUD. I don't know if y'all have used the AAQ feature, but I will make a note. But at the local level, we'll be using the program performance matrix that we review in our data and grants group. Okay.
We have used AAQ, just not for that question, but we've used it plenty of times before.
I'm sure you have, especially during the monitoring visit. Okay. Okay. But I'm just making a note to self. And then the collaborative applications detailed instructions were just released the end of last week, so I've not had a chance to kind of look specifically at that, but I'll check that first, and if that is insufficient, I'll submit an AAQ and keep y'all posted. Alrighty, y'all want to talk dollars and cents? Let's do it. So HUD has also not yet released the actual dollar amounts. What we do know, based on the grant inventory worksheet that some of you may have helped complete or check accuracy for a few weeks ago, Orange County expects the annual renewal demand to be $796,633, and that is funding for new renewal projects, expansion, reallocated, or consolidated projects. And so that is basically everyone who got funded last year, funding them at the exact same level. That's what that funding dollar entails. And so you may notice that that's about a $60,000 increase from the previous year. And that's because Orange County was awarded the DV bonus and a portion of the bonus application that we had submitted from the previous year. The applicants that are eligible to apply for the annual renewal demand are nonprofits, governments, and PHAs. Next is the domestic violence bonus, and that is only for new project funding that's dedicated to serving survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. I believe from the regulations that were discussed at the HUD briefing last week, this does not, folks who may be experiencing trafficking kind of do not fall under kind of a population that is able to be served using this fund or this set of funds. But again, it's $50,000 that's available for new project funding. So it could either be a brand new project, it could be an expansion of an existing project, as long as the new project that's getting proposed is dedicated solely to survivors of DV, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So I know that for 2023, we were awarded the 50,000 DV bonus. Is this that same thing, or is there now additional DV bonus money?
Good question. So the DV bonus money that CoMPAS Center was awarded last year, that now gets added to CoMPAS's annual renewal demand. So your initial grant amount is now inclusive of whatever kind of the initial grant was, plus the expansion projects that you were awarded last year.
So then that frees up, so then this is, somebody could then apply for another $50,000, which is a DV bonus. So you're saying that like technically for 2023, although we know that we got to that number with the DV bonus, it's not really called the DV bonus anymore. It's just part of our renewal for this.
Correct. Correct. So the I'm happy to send out the grant inventory worksheet again, so you see. So your projects, your new project applications that were approved all got consolidated into one project. So now it's all a renewal. Yeah.
So every time something gets renewed and consolidated, it kind of means that DV bonus comes back on the table.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. One thing I do want to note, a couple things. One is that the DV bonus funds can be applied for by any agency. It does not need to be solely a DV service providing agency. The project that is proposed, though, does need to solely serve survivors. But that could be something like an expansion to the rapid rehousing project. That could be something like coordinated entry. It could be a PSH project, any of those things. The other thing I'll note here, and I'll also kind of note this at the end, is that I'm more than happy to be available to any either kind of returning project applicants or new organizations that are interested in applying for these funds or talking more to provide technical assistance, kind of talk through some ideas that you may have about how you may want to apply for new projects, or expand existing projects based on the local priorities as well as the priorities that are identified in this year's NOFO. So I just want to put that out on the table. It's been lovely, to be honest, having some of these conversations as a community and kind of learning what y'all are doing and where you'd like to go to continue to serve the folks I'm trying to serve. The next pot of funds are the bonus funds, and those are funds for any, again, reallocated, new, renewal, expansion, or consolidated project. Those bonus funds can serve kind of anyone who is HUD category 1 or 4, so currently experiencing homelessness. So it doesn't strictly need to be tied to any kind of subpopulation of folks. And these bonus funds are really going to be where HUD is looking to see evidence that we are collaborating with our healthcare providers and housing providers in this space. And that is that bonus. This bonus money is kind of tied to a percentage of the annual renewal demand. And so for Orange County this year, the amount that's available is $39,832. And then, and for all three of these funds, nonprofits, governments, and PHAs are eligible to apply. And all three of these are considered a part of that project priority listing. And so communities are really encouraged to rate and rank those projects, again, based on the local need. And then the Orange County Partnership to End Homelessness, as the collaborative applicant in this process, is the only applicant who's able to apply for the Continuum of Care Planning grant. And that provides support for things like coordinating activities, strategic planning, performance improvements, governance, compensation for people lived experience is an eligible cost for planning funds, training, things of that nature. And so that is also allocated by a percentage of the total annual renewal demand. And so Orange County will be applying for $23,899. And again, that gets listed on the project priority listing, but it's not part of that kind of ranked list. So if there's no further questions about kind of the dollars and cents amount so far, we'll move into the process piece.
Rachel, just a clarification,
Yeah.
Coordinated entry is funded in our annual renewal demand right now?
That's correct. Yep. So Orange County, through the housing helpline, provides coordinated entry for Orange County, and that let me think. I believe that was first funded in 2020, and then that was expanded in the FY21 competition.
Okay.
Yep. And that falls under, let's see, it's SSOC, so Supportive Services Only Coordinated Entry. So basically that it's funding those kind of support services, but it's not funding rental assistance.
Got it.
Good question. All right, to clarify a little bit about kind of roles and responsibilities. Again, our process is really designed to be transparent, have a measure of accountability going multiple ways with all the kind of stakeholders, and also to really kind of highlight community involvement in this process. So the project review committee, we had an open invitation to join, as well as ongoing kind of interest or information sessions if folks want. We held an information session in the spring of this year. And the project review committee, their purpose is a number-fold. It's to both review, score, and rank continuum of care and ESG proposals. And then the role is also to really review performance over the course of the year, so that kind of there's no surprises for folks. There's opportunities to ask questions and kind of correct course, as I know, a lot of times agencies and projects, may have to address competing demands, especially as life throws the things that it does. One additional thing that will be discussed by the leadership team shortly is that there's a proposal on the table to allow for a brief presentation and question and answer period to the leadership team prior to the leadership team voting on a project rank list. Again, just to have more kind of more of a process for project applicants to really share the goals of the work, the intended impact of the work, and how the work that you all do directly ties to gaps in our existing system. And then the leadership team reviews the community application and approves the ranked project list that then gets submitted to HUD. So when we talk about the CoC application, it really consists of 3 parts. And so it's the CoC application itself, which this year is a total of 200 points. There are the project applications that you all submit in eSnaps. And then there's also the CoC priority listing. And so that is those new projects that are either created through reallocation, through the CoC bonus and DV bonus, as well as renewal projects. These all, again, require ranking by the project review committee, who makes the recommendation after kind of doing a deep dive into the project applications. And then it is discussed, and then a final recommendation is made by the leadership team. So moving into the different funding sources, there's different kind of eligible project types and ramifications. So there's a possibility for renewal, which are kind of sometimes we'll call like a straight renewal, consolidation or expansion projects. And so again, currently Orange County has permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and supportive services coordinated entry, are 3 kind of project types. New project types can be created either in part or in whole from an existing project. So last year there was some reallocation as Community Link was not recommended for renewal last year. That kind of freed up resources across the community to allocate into other programs. The DV bonus is also eligible for new projects. And again, that project services must be for survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. And also the project must be housing first. And then the new project, another new project option is the CoC bonus. That may be awarded if the CoC application demonstrates that there's ranking of projects based on system improvement, and that there's efforts to address severe barriers to housing. So again, those are going to be the kind of key things that HUD is really going to be looking for, in addition to the community applications score when HUD makes determinations about what projects to provide those additional funding to. So eligible costs for activities within your projects are things like capital costs, leasing and operating funds, also rental assistance, and the length and type of rental assistance may vary depending on the project and in alignment with Orange County's written standards, supportive services, HMIS, and project administration. Any questions about eligible costs or project type? We'll move a little bit further into the project types and then the funding criteria. This is typically most relevant for new projects. But so HUD considers permanent housing. Again, that doesn't mean that no one, once someone moves in, that they, never leave ever again. It just means that someone enters into housing without a defined kind of exit date or destination. Those would be things like considered like transitional housing. But if you're moving in and you could stay there a year or 15 years, that's permanent housing. And so again, it permits people with lived experience of homelessness to live as independently as possible. It's really, again, community-based housing without a that's probably a smarter way to say that. It's without a designated length of stay. And typically leases are for a year or longer and are renewable and only terminable for cause. So that means that someone would not necessarily, a landlord would not be able to not renew a lease because someone, didn't meet with their case manager monthly. There's no kind of service requirements. Yeah. So moving into the different types of permanent housing. First off, permanent supportive housing provides both housing assistance and services for people with lived experience of homelessness who also have a disability. Again, that does not necessarily mean that they need to be receiving social security disability income or supplemental security income or VA disability. It just means that they have a condition that is expected to last a year or more that significantly impairs an area of functioning. For some, case management may be required for an initial period after exiting homelessness, but assistance really should only be terminated in the most severe cases, if at all. So again, there should not be a lot of kind of service requirements or sobriety or adhering to treatment or things of that nature tied to someone's ability to kind of maintain their lease. Eligible costs for PSH include acquiring property, rehabilitation, new construction, leasing, rental assistance, operating costs, and supportive services. Moving next over to rapid rehousing. It's designed to be temporary rental assistance and or services with flexible funds that are individualized. So anywhere between 0 and 24 months of rental and utility assistance. Services can be available for up to 6 months after rental assistance ends. So say someone's income changes or things of that nature where they no longer need rental assistance, they may still be able to benefit from some supportive services, for some of those, tenancy maintenance skills or additional supports as they settle into a new home. Again, the client retains the unit after the assistance ends so that they don't have to kind of move once their time in the program is done. And again, at least monthly case management is offered, except where it's prohibited by the Violence Against Women Act or the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act. And so for both of these program types, the funding criteria that HUD is looking for is really at least 3 of the 4. And HUD tends to take the more the better type of approach. And so one, really looking to see that the type of housing that's proposed meets the needs of the clients. So that a provider who predominantly serves families isn't going to mostly have, single room occupancy and 1-bedroom units. They may have larger units to better serve the needs of the family. Also looking to see that there are appropriate services to ensure a transition to and retention of that permanent housing. So that again, it's not a very, very light touch if more support is needed, and vice versa. Also, the HUD is looking to see that there are connections to mainstream resources. So those are resources that are available to the public, not just people experiencing homelessness. So there may be things like connections to employment and education programs, support with applying for things like unemployment or Medicaid, things like access to supplemental nutrition and public transportation and childcare vouchers and all of those types of things. That HUD is not a go it alone type agency, but it really takes, again, kind of braiding these resources together to provide support for folks. And also, we're looking to see that participants are actually assisted in obtaining permanent housing, so that there's that housing search support, and again, the support needed to help someone kind of at least initially kind of obtain that housing. Another type is considered what's called joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing. And so those are for agencies really that provide both transitional housing programs and rapid rehousing to all participants. And for transitional housing, kind of the assistance of those units is a portion of that. And also for rapid rehousing, that there's both rental assistance and supportive services. And again, participants can choose to only go in for transitional housing or only apply or only go in for rapid rehousing. But the agency must make both of those project types available to all participants. And the things that HUD is looking for when it comes to funding criteria for joint transitional housing, rapid rehousing is, you may see some similarity here, that again, the type of the housing proposed meets the needs of the clients, that the services really ensure transition to and retention of permanent housing, that there continue to be those connection to mainstream resources, that participants are assisted in obtaining permanent housing. But the other things that HUD is really looking for also is that there are the housing first practices in place, and that there's enough rapid rehousing to ensure that folks can move to permanent housing. And that's demonstrated by having a rapid rehousing budget that's twice the transitional housing portion. And that way, so that you're not taking on a bunch of folks into transitional housing, but then having nowhere for folks to go once their time is up in transitional housing. So talked a little, so I want to kind of define some terms a little bit more. When we talk about housing first, what we're really talking about is that we're prioritizing most rapid placement into permanent housing, so that we're not kind of making folks show readiness. The fastest way for someone to find permanent housing is to go into permanent housing. And so that it's operating with very low barriers. And again, so it's accessible for folks, that there's not a lot of kind of preconditions for program entry. And also that there's no service participation requirements, so that folks are not required to attend classes or, treatment, things of that nature. Also that sobriety and income is not required. And also looking to see that agencies and programs that are designed to be housing first don't kind of only serve one group of folks, don't only serve people who don't have criminal justice histories or don't have evictions. So we're really trying to make sure that we're serving all folks, including folks who may have some pretty significant barriers to finding and maintaining housing. Any questions about housing first or the project types before we move into the next kind of term and concept?
Rachel.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So you say with housing first, they can't have any criminal records, or it's okay if they do?
It's very much okay if they do. Yes.
Oh,
so,
okay. Great.
So, yeah. So we know that, and Linda, I'm sure you see this where you are. We see this as well. Oftentimes, the folks who have the hardest time, once they're experiencing homelessness, finding housing, it's folks who may have some criminal legal barriers that come up when people are applying for housing, when they're applying for work. And so, yeah, we want to make sure that that agencies and programs are not only serving kind of the people who have the fewest barriers or the folks who are kind of the easiest to serve, that we want to be serving all people.
Okay, great.
Yeah, good question.
And how does the partnership measure this?
Good question. On the scorecard that we'll get to, one of the things we ask programs, so I don't know if y'all remember, but there's kind of a narrative portion where project applicants can describe their policies and procedures, but also kind of how they're serving folks who may have multiple barriers. So we'll get into that in just a minute. Good questions. Anything else? Okay. So the next program type is coordinated entry. And so again, that's a centralized process that's designed to coordinate client intakes, assessment, and referral. We'll make sure that it covers all of Orange County so that we're not just serving, the denser kind of southern part of the county, but that coordinated entry is accessible to all folks. Also that it is well advertised so that folks are aware of coordinated entry, aware of how to reach out to, again, in Orange County, the housing helpline, and that it includes a standardized assessment tool, which in Orange County, as it currently stands, is the VI-SPDAT. And so when HUD is looking at funding criteria for coordinated entry, they're looking to see at least two things, but again, the more the better. So they're looking to see that it is easily available or reachable for all persons within Orange County who are seeking homeless assistance, and particularly that it is accessible for folks with disabilities. Also looking to see that there's a strategy for advertising that's really designed specifically to reach people experiencing homelessness with some of the highest barriers, so that there's a really kind of assertive and active outreach process for reaching out to folks who may not kind of traditionally come into kind of traditional pathways like government agencies or other things. Also really looking to see that there's a standardized assessment process that is applied to all kind of populations, and that clients are really directed to the appropriate housing and services that best meet their needs. So that again, someone who has very low service needs is not getting referred to permanent supportive housing, and that someone who has really high service needs is not getting referred just to something like a housing choice voucher without the additional supports in place that they may need to be successful. Any questions about coordinated entry as a project type that's eligible for CoC funds? Okay, we'll move next then into the local process and timeline. So as I think many of you know, some of us were in a meeting when HUD released the Continuum of Care fiscal year 2022 notice of funding opportunity on August 1st. So HUD requires that there's more than one deadline for this funding competition, because the Continuum of Care as the lead agency is required to host kind of a local competition before sending project applications and the community application on to HUD. So the overall deadline is Friday, September 30th. And then HUD requires a number of other things. So the project applications are due into the Continuum of Care no later than 30 days before the overall deadline. And so the project applications are due to Orange County on Monday, August 29th at 12 noon. The Continuum of Care also is required to notify project applicants no later than 15 days before the overall deadline of whether the application will be recommended for funding onto HUD. And so that notification is to happen before September 15th. And then we are also required to publicly post the community application, the project applications, and the project ranking for at least 2 days before Orange County submits the overall applications into HUD. So that is kind of the big picture HUD required timeframes. I want to acknowledge that this timeframe is significantly tighter than it has been in recent memory. Any questions about that before we move into kind of the next steps? Okay. So again, the project applications and supplemental materials, and we've got kind of we've got a document called applicant instructions posted on the partnership's website with kind of what those supporting documents are, is due by 12 noon on Monday, August 29th. That is 2 weeks from today. I wish I could wave a magic wand and either freeze time, an 80s TV show, or extend that. That is, again, that time frame is set by HUD. So we are asking that project applicants submit to email to me a PDF of the project application in eSnaps, as well as the supplemental documentation, and that involves the grantee certification, as well as various other supporting documents. That depends a little bit on the type of agency that you are, whether you are a new agency or a renewal agency. And again, so nonprofits may have board minutes or financial statements to submit. Renewal applications will have APRs, which are annual performance reviews that are that we kind of submit to HUD within 90 days of a contract ending. If all of this is brand new to you, please let me know, and we'll try to kind of slow it down or talk through things. And again, I'm also very happy to kind of talk offline if this is something that sounds like you're interested in learning more about or applying for. So after turning in the application itself, the work continues both on the project applications and on the community application. So Continuum of Care staff will review the project applications, and we may request some clarifications or identify some areas for improvement, because HUD requires first and foremost that we review your project applications to make sure, again, that you're meeting the requirements of the community's written standards, but also that HUD wants to see that we're kind of working as a team and working as a system and providing input and supporting one another. And that the other thing is that HUD is going to score our entire community based on the quality of these project applications. And so having multiple eyes on things can really help us maximize points, make sure that there's kind of consistency across some of these pieces and parts. And so that's okay. That work will happen after the 29th. But the community application scoring will only consider what's submitted by the local deadline. I don't know if folks remember from years past, but yeah, we provide some additional feedback and support beyond the 29th. But the project review committee will only consider what's submitted by that local deadline. Any questions?
So Rachel, when you say HUD scores the entire community based on the quality of the project apps, when you say community, you talking about Orange County?
Yeah.
Orange County.
Yep.
Okay.
So so Linda, our data and grants work group back, I think it was in our June meeting, we reviewed the feedback that we got from HUD, because they, you know, they showed us, Orange County's application scored, I think it was like 160 something. And so we scored above, HUD likes to be complicated. We scored above kind of the median, which is what allowed us to get some of the bonus funds that we applied for last year.
Okay.
And so that's where, like, y'all do everything you can on your project applications, but also it's when the community application scores well, that increases our ability to actually get be awarded the bonus funds that we apply for. Okay. And kind of like Ardith mentioned earlier, once Orange County or once y'all organizations are awarded those bonus funds, they become what you're able to apply for as a renewal each year.
Okay.
And then but then it kind of gets replenished and it increases kind of what we're able to do.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So the supplemental documentation, since we're a nonprofit, we submit, the board of directors and all the other detailed information. I'm just wondering, like, what's the guidance for projects like ours, where you all pay for the supportive services, but not all of the rental assistance, and how, because that's not reflected on the program performance matrix, like, is there a leeway for agencies to submit supplemental information to kind of like quantify the impact of the funds that HUD or that is included in the CoC funding?
Gotcha. So I think, well, let's make sure that we go into the project application, or sorry, the applicant instructions themselves, because we'll that's where we'll kind of review like the organizational budget and other things that can highlight some of those other sources of funding. And again, the project review committee and the leadership team, I think, understands the way that organizations kind of have to pull different types of funds and support to kind of make these programs work. And so that's where in the agency scorecard, I think there's actually an opportunity for y'all to kind of share that piece of feedback as well.
Okay.
So there's both the kind of objective part of like your budget, but then there's also the narrative piece if you want to add additional feedback beyond there.
Got it.
Yeah, good question. So here's our local timeline. 2 weeks ago, HUD released the notice of funding opportunity that we sent out to the service providers and the community at large, posted on the website, Facebook, and all the things. HUD hosted a NOFO instructional session last week. Did anyone attend that? Just out of curiosity.
No, I did not.
Okay, it was fast and furious, I will say, and there is a recording of it available on HUD's website, yeah, I can. Would folks want me to kind of hyperlink where that recording can be found?
Yes,
I'll do
would
that.
love it.
Just
Yeah, me too.
okay. And the chat is the chat from that session is also available. So hyperlink the session. I'll actually, so on the partnerships website, where we have the funding opportunities and then the local timeline, if it works for folks, I don't remember, I'll just hyperlink. Oh shucks. I'll hyperlink right where it says HUD CoC NOFO instructional session. I'll just hyperlink so that takes you directly to that recording. All right. Okay. Yep. And so then project applications are due via email to me by noon on Monday the 29th. And then that week, this time frame pushes some things up, which is why we don't have an exact date for some of these things just yet. But basically that week, the project review committee scores the project applications. And then the next week we'll meet to formulate the funding recommendations and prioritization where they rate and then rank the project applications. And then the following week, the week of September 11th, the leadership team will meet to determine the funding recommendation. One of the things that I've proposed that will be discussed tonight, the leadership team, is a process to allow project applicants 5 minutes or so to kind of share out about the project that you're applying for, or the renewal funds you're applying for, or new funds you're applying for, as well as a little bit of time for question and answer. I think Lakira remembers that experience last year. So wanted to just be more kind of explicit about adding that to this process that we engage in. And then on no later than Wednesday, September 14th, partnership staff will notify project applicants in writing of whether your project is going to be included in the CoC's application, as well as if there are any kind of disagreements or appeals process, we'll include that in writing as well. And then the plan is, we'll kind of continue to be in communication in case your project application needs to be edited, or if there's anything that any additional feedback that we can provide. And we ask that project application revisions are complete by Friday, September 23rd. And then again, that is something that you all will complete and submit in eSnaps. But we'll also send the partnership a PDF of that application, because we are required to post everything, all the things on the partnership's website no later than Wednesday, September 28th. And again, so that includes the community application, all of the project applications, and the project priority listing for any community feedback prior to submitting the application to HUD on the 30th. Any questions about the local timeline?
Will we get a list of this right here? The local timeline, will we get a copy of that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I emailed this out, and it's also on the partnership's website, but I can also email it directly to you, Linda. Is there anyone else that you want me to kind of include in there, or any other? Also, I mean, because of, do you want to just maybe find some time to meet in the next couple of days or this week?
Yeah.
Talk through a little bit more.
That'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do that.
Okay.
Linda, do you want to actually?
Linda, last year was my first year. Don't be alone.
Yeah.
I know I'm kind of lost, but I'm like, I'll figure it out after I talk to Rachel what's going on.
Yeah, Linda, shoot me an email, and if you want to include, if there's anyone else you want to include on that,
Okay.
we can find a time to connect for sure.
Okay.
Thank you. It is a lot though, for sure. Okay, so if you're interested in applying for a project, definitely read the Notice of Funding Opportunity. It's called the NOFO, and it's linked on our website under current CoC application. Make a plan for completing your project application. Consult the rating and ranking tool that we're going to review in just a moment. Should not say to be. It is currently posted on the website, so we'll move into that in just a second. Any other questions before we move into the rating and ranking tool? Also, Ardith and Lakira, no pressure. If you want to find some time to connect in the next week or so, happy to make that work as well.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Alrighty. Stephanie is coming on just in time. Okay, cool. Welcome, IFC. Good to see you. We are going to pause. Get out of my slideshow and into the next thing. So, here. Sorry, yeah, give me one moment. So first we've got, I'm going to make this much bigger. I want to talk first about kind of the threshold requirements, and then we'll go into the scorecard. I know this is teeny tiny. Can folks see this somewhat okay?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
In the first view.
Okay. So there are a number of kind of what are considered threshold requirements, where if your agency or the program does not kind of meet kind of the threshold, is kind of that bare minimum, or that kind of basement for what's required. You either need to meet it or have an exemption that's been issued by the Continuum of Care. And that, I think in years past, has been things like a corrective action plan, or some other type of agreement that, acknowledging, yes, we're not there yet, but these are the ways that we're working to get there. And so HUD really determines the HUD thresholds, and then the continuum of care determines whether folks are meeting the CoC thresholds. And so these are things like having an active SAM registration, having a valid, it used to be DUNS, now it's the UEI number. Is that right, Stephanie and Ardith?
Yes, unique
UEI.
entity identifier or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Unique entity identifier. Thank you.
Every few years.
Wordies, I love it. Also, that the project applicant and subrecipients meet eligibility as determined by the HUD Act. Sorry, not the HUD Act. It's Essential CFR 578. I'll share it all. And that you've provided proof of eligibility, such as like nonprofit documentation. Also, that agencies have the financial management capacity to carry out the project that's described, and that you've got the capacity to administer federal funds. That you've got the certifications that are required and spelled out in the notice of funding opportunity. That you're serving the population that's intended to be served that's identified through the NOFO, and that you're not serving ineligible folks. Also, that you're participating in HMIS, unless you are a DV service provider, in which case that you're utilizing a comparable database that captures the kind of same required data elements. That you have no outstanding delinquent federal debts, that you've got no disbarments or suspensions, that there's a pre-selection review of performance if you do have delinquent federal debt, and that you've got a sufficient financial management system that has kind of the checks and balances that are needed, that you're not making false statements in the application itself, that there's a mandatory disclosure requirement, so prohibition against lobbying activities. Also, there's equal participation of faith-based organizations in HUD's programs and activities. And then there's also a resolution of any civil rights matters. So if there's any outstanding matters, that they are resolved before the application submission deadline of September 30th. And again, these are measures that you all will kind of see and submit to in eSNAPs for the project applications. But then HUD really kind of determines whether those threshold requirements are met. Any questions about the threshold requirements? And then for new project applications, it's actually a very, I'll pull this up. So I actually think I was trying to kind of do a line item comparison. I think it's kind of exactly the same. And again, any new projects, happy to kind of talk through this a little bit more. Yeah, F16. Any questions about that before we move into the local scorecard?
Rachel, what's the file path for this document on the website? Is it on the current CoC page?
Yep. So if you go to here, I'll just pop this here. So, oops. Can you all see this? I'll make it a little bit bigger. So here's the partnership website, and I'll throw this link in the chat. But again, it's under funding, and then you go to current CoC competition. So it says background information. Here's the link itself to the notice of funding opportunity. Here are the dollar amounts that we previewed early in our conversation today. When last I checked, I think it was Saturday, there were not yet the detailed instructions or project applications on HUD's website. Does anyone check today to see if the project application or detailed instructions are available yet?
I have not.
Okay. My plan is to check daily between now and September 30th. So I will post to y'all as soon as I see something. Here's our applicant briefing, and then project review committee. So going down into, this is where the community application information will be for the community to review once we're kind of at that phase. But in the meanwhile, here are the project review and ranking resources. So pardon the typo, that's going to bother me. There's our threshold requirements we were talking about. And so here's a link for the new and renewal thresholds. And then here is project applicant instructions, along with agency certifications for any PSH providers. There's the best practices form. There's the NOFO itself. And I will, once this information is posted by HUD, I'll also hyperlink it down here for you. Any other questions about what's available on the website so far, or on the partnership's website so far?
Thank you.
Alrighty. So, actually, let's just go right here to local school card rather than be digging around for it. Can folks see this okay? We can maybe talk through a little bit about kind of, again, the scoring, what project types are here. There aren't significant, I mean, yeah, there aren't really kind of hugely significant changes from the previous year, but I'll highlight here some areas where there was some changes from the previous year's scorecard. So everything here that's considered a threshold measure are those continuum of care determined thresholds. And so all project applicants, new and renewals, need to either be meeting these thresholds or have kind of permission from the continuum of care to proceed without meeting them. And so that may be a letter, that may be a training, participating in a training, or a corrective action plan of some kind. For new projects, some of this will be kind of determined by not kind of what you've already done, but by how you plan to meet this threshold measure. Okay. And so first and foremost, just looking to see that applications are complete and the data is consistent. And also here we'll see, note anything that's where it says applicant supplied information. Anything that's in light green, you are welcome to add information. You do not have to. Anything that is in dark green, we are asking that you explain how your agency meets that metric. So, and then the rubric over here is kind of how it's getting determined by the project review committee, whether or not this measure is met. Please disregard the project application question references because the project applications have not yet been released. Once they are, I'll do a crosswalk to also let y'all know where these questions may be asked in the project application. So the next measure is if the agency participates in or intends to participate in coordinated entry. Looking first at that based on meeting attendance. And so asking that you explain how your agency meets this metric. And also looking to see that the agency attends 75% or more of coordinated entry planning and home committee meetings in a 12-month period. Additionally, looking to see that project services are aligned with that housing first system orientation that we talked about earlier. And then new for this year is also that the agency agrees to provide staff support to participate in a cross CoC monitoring pilot. And so, again, looking to see that your project services are designed to allow necessary support for participants to enter and maintain housing. Asking that So Orange, Durham, and Wake counties are planning to engage in a cross-CoC monitoring visit. HUD does not currently require housing first for all CoCs, but is inching towards that requirement. And so we're really looking to get kind of a baseline measure of how are we kind of across the triangle doing in this when it comes to our policies and procedures and what actually happens in practice. So we're asking that agencies that receive continuum of care funds agree to participate in a monitoring visit, and also that you provide staff support to conduct a monitoring visit, which is estimated to be kind of a one-time or probably annual, but starting right now, one-time 8 to 10 hours of staff time, kind of total between an hour's training, maybe a 2-hour site visit, and then a team lead to kind of write a report using a housing first assessment tool that we put out. Next is that the agency has documented secured minimum match, which for CoC funds is 25% of the requested award. And again, I'm happy to talk with folks more about match, kind of what it is, how to get there, what are eligible sources of match, of both cash and in-kind match. Next threshold measure is that the project has reasonable costs per permanent housing exit as defined locally. This also used to be a pointed measure. This year, we're just making it a threshold measure because it's a little bit squishy, to be honest, to define this. Different CoCs do this in different ways. Some have a discrete kind of dollar amount, but we also want to make sure that agencies are not getting, there may be different costs based on the type of population you're serving or the different, we would expect that PSH might have some more intensive costs than rapid rehousing. So we want to make sure that we're not unduly kind of burdening different agencies. So we took the pointed measure out of that for now. We are retaining it as a threshold, but we're really looking to see what is the average CoC cost per permanent housing exit by program type. And we're just looking to see, is the cost reasonable based on the duration of rental assistance and the type of supportive services provided? We're also looking to see if the project is financially feasible.
Rachel, I have a
Yeah.
question.
Yep.
I know you said it's squishy, but like, how is that currently calculated per project?
Yeah, good question. So what we're really looking to do this year is just kind of develop like a baseline measure. So how much, what is the kind of total, again, CoC award divided by the number of permanent housing exits that your agency has had. And so that's kind of how we're going to arrive at that number. And we're trying to, again, kind of develop a baseline to kind of look at that in future years. I know in kind of reviewing some CoCs just kind of say reasonable and leave it at that. Again, what may be reasonable to some communities may be not reasonable to others, but we know that different jurisdictions have different kind of going rental rates or kind of rental prices. One CoC I was looking at had, if it's under $10,000, it's this number of points. If it's under $5,000, it's this number of points. I don't know yet that the project review committee wants to be that, wants to be kind of tied directly to a number yet like that. And so that's where we're, I think, really just trying to take a step back and kind of develop like a baseline.
Okay. Yeah, just processing how we calculate hours. So yeah, more like independent conversations. Yeah,
we could talk through that. And I think that, again, the context that y'all have will be, I want to make sure that we as a continuum of care and as a project review committee are doing the same calculation, but if there's like additional information that's needed for the project review committee to consider that, then that's important information. But yeah, we know that different projects, specific, especially different permanent housing projects, may be weaving together a variety of funding, a variety of sources of funding, and so that's where we're just looking at those CoC costs.
Okay.
And we can talk offline. Next, looking to see that the project is financially feasible as determined by an audited financial statement or budget management letter. Also looking to see that the agency is an active participant in the continuum of care. And so that's the grantee certification that's linked in the project applicant instructions, and also determined by attendance at the leadership team, coordinated entry planning and home committee meetings, that the agency participates in the point in time count and the housing inventory count, consults with the CoC on the application, and that your project is aligned with continuum of care goals, and that you fully participate in coordinated entry. Next is that there's an acceptable organizational audit and financial review, which is, again, looking at the certified audited financial statement or budget management letter, that there's an acceptable review, that you're identified as, the agency is identified as low risk, and that there's no exceptions to any kind of standard accounting practices. And then we're moving into the scored elements. So this is one area that has had some improvement to try to reduce some of the, I guess I'll say, squishiness of recent years. Oh my goodness, time is getting moving along. So 10 points, looking to see that agencies are applying a racial equity lens to homeless services and housing. You have a little bit more space here to answer that. Yeah, that the agency is both incorporating racial equity goals into the organizational goals, such as reviewing program outcomes disaggregated by race and ethnicity, that you're setting goals to identify and reduce disparities. The agency is actively working to center people of color, specifically Black and African American folks, with lived as well as folks with lived experience of housing instability and homelessness in the organizational work. And that can be demonstrated by things like changing your hiring and retention policies and practices, having at least one person with lived experience on your board of directors. Also looking to see that agencies are increasing their knowledge base on racial equity, including investing in staff training, and that the agency maintains an ongoing practice of equity-focused staff development. Most of these, so for renewal projects, looking to see that program entries are coming from coordinated entry, utilizing a spot check. And again, Compass, we can kind of talk offline about how we do that while maintaining, while kind of de-identifying and protecting PII in that spot check. That the program conforms to written standards. That again, there is documented financial stability. That the project has the experience working with people in housing crisis and providing housing or supportive services. This one is both a threshold measure and a pointed measure, that the agency has experience effectively utilizing public funds. The only kind of change here was that it had been federal funds, but we actually, in an effort to try to kind of bring in new agencies and new organizations, change it to public funds, because we recognize how burdensome the learning process really can be to onboard into receiving federal funds. A number of these have not really changed. So again, 10 points for demonstrated understanding of client needs, 10 points for the type and scale of the project services that it's meeting the client needs, 10 points for connecting clients to mainstream benefits. This is a new one for this year based on the NOFO, that there's 10 points to identify and address barriers to program participation and rapid placement into permanent housing, as identified by a demonstrated review of program policies and procedures that negatively impact an eligible client's ability to participate in services, that there's a plan to address program barriers to increase participation by eligible clients, that there's a demonstrated commitment to serving people with severe barriers. So look here, this kind of gets to your question earlier. I'm looking at, how are you looking to serve people who have severe barriers to rapid housing placement, like a criminal justice background, an eviction history, high service needs and limited social supports, and that in your program design, that you've got a plan to address those severe barriers to housing placement. Most of these have been unchanged, so that the project assists for 10 points, assists clients in securing and maintaining permanent housing, that you're looking to increase client income through employment or other means. For new project types, looking to see that projects can gear up and start quickly within the contract execution. Our threshold measures for renewal projects is with high HMIS data quality, with null values and data errors at 10% or less, and that there's a high bed and unit utilization rate. For rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing, that is expected to be the same, looking at utilization rates of 90% or higher. For emergency shelter and transitional housing, we're looking for utilization rates to be at 80% or higher, because we know that over this last year, there have been some pretty significant COVID-related disruptions to intakes during COVID outbreaks and things of that nature. For renewal projects, again, looking for 10 points to see if your project is spending funds as awarded based on those spending printouts. That for renewal projects that exits to permanent housing are also, again, rapid rehousing 90% or higher, homelessness prevention 75% or higher, street outreach 5% or higher, and shelter and transitional housing 12% or higher. And lots of these are the same. 10 points for renewals for exits to or retention of permanent housing for permanent supportive housing projects. Our earned income for project stayers and project leavers, 2.5 points. No significant changes there. For looking at the number of days from program or project entry to move-in, looking to see that that is 45 days or less. Looking to see low rates of return to homelessness within 12 months of exiting permanent housing at 15% or less. And then for those renewals, again, looking at the length of time that folks are in programs, we're just looking to see decreases from previous year. So we used to say 90 days or less. Things have gone in such a manner that we're really just looking at, have we decreased that length of time homeless and length of time that folks have in program prior to housing, so that it's less time than it was in the previous year. And then these are unchanged. That, again, I think to the point earlier that we're really serving folks who have some significant needs, that we're looking to see that programs have are admitting a high number of program participants with 0 income at entry, that we're serving participants who have more than one disability. And again, for rapid rehousing, yeah, and also looking to see that participants are entering projects from places not meant for human habitation. And that case managers have an adequate client ratio to actually provide high quality case management services. And so the total points available at this year's funding competition for new programs, it's 130 points. For renewal programs, shelter and transitional housing can apply for up to 220 points. Street outreach can apply for 170 points. Homelessness prevention can apply for up to 210 points. And PSH, that also should say rapid rehousing, can apply for 220 points. And in an effort to kind of compare apples to apples, we'll be looking at how many points did the project earn divided by the maximum number of points, because you know that each project type may have some slightly different kind of elements related there. Any questions about the scorecard that you want to talk about in this forum?
Rachel, is it possible for us to see a copy of the APR that you're using for the scorecard? So that if we're not meeting something, we can address it, even if we're not required to.
Yeah, great question, Stephanie. So the actually in the, just pulling up, there we go. So you can see it because you should, so here are the CoC project applicant instructions with hyperlinks for the documents I'm looking to fill out. You actually, Stephanie, are you able to pull the APR for your PSH program?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. That's what I'll be looking at.
Okay, for that time period right there.
Yep.
Okay. I thought there was a spot where you're comparing that year to the previous year, or are you comparing that year to current, or?
So for the AP, so yeah, these are all the APR questions here. So that is not a comparison. None of these are relative or kind of comparison years. The only one that compares over the previous year is, that'd be shelter, actually, which is not there's gonna be no renewals for shelter or transitional housing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's-
thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Again, all of these resources are hyperlinked here. We've got the fillable scorecard there for you to actually enter those narratives in. Any other comments or questions? All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks so much for joining us. Stop.